Greetings, everyone. Pete Pardo here from Sea of Tranquility. Welcome to another episode of Ranking the Albums. And today, here he is once again in the co-captain's chair, Mr. Grant Arthur
Hey, nice
from
to see
Grant's
you,
Rock
Pete.
Warehouse and the
Hey,
Contrarians. And in fact, while you folks are busy watching this episode, we are actually hanging out, probably getting ready to have a nice lunch at the warehouse today because we
mhm.
just had Sea of Tranquility Fall Fest last night. Even though when Grant and I are talking right now, it hasn't happened yet, but I figured
Right.
through the magic of taping and all that sort of stuff, we hopefully had a great time last night, right, Grant? I hope we had a great.
I haven't had it yet, but I'm assuming it's going to be a wonderful
Yes,
time.
I
So
think
I'm
so.
looking forward to it. Hanging out with everybody. Actually, I haven't really seen Martin and I haven't seen anybody in person. Jamie lives 40 minutes away from me, and I haven't met him. We did talk about meeting at a record store once, but never happened. So I have to drive all the way to New York to see everybody. But that's fun.
Yeah,
It's going to be fun. So I'm
it'll be
looking
fun.
forward to
It'll be fun. Looking forward to it. So next time we'll tell you guys all about it. But as of this particular episode, it hasn't happened yet. So, but and seeing as it's been such a busy week, Grant and I decided we did want to do another episode together. We've been talking about doing Streets, even though it's only two albums. And I know some of you who watch these two album shows are like, why do a ranking for two albums? But as Grant always likes to say, who's talking bands like Streets? Nobody's talking
Yeah,
about
this is the
that.
kind of stuff I like to talk about. Bands that no one talks about. Whether they did two albums or five albums. I mean, we're talking Steve
Steve
Walsh, we're
Walsh.
talking Mike Slammer, and
Yes.
right there is worth talking about. So I figured we should probably talk about this.
Steve with his really bad haircut. There he is, though, and the
Yeah.
tank top. But yeah. So this is a band formed by Steve and Mike Slammer right after Steve left Kansas. So this is post the Audio Visions album by Kansas. So with that album, band getting a little more commercial. I think Steve and Kerry Livgren kind of at odds about the writing and whose style is going to take over the band. Steve decided I'm going to go off and do something else, which he did. And he put together this band, Streets, with Mike Slammer, of course, formerly of City Boy. Very cool band. If folks have not listened to them, really, really cool band. Billy Greer on bass and backing vocals. Of course, Billy would go with
Yeah.
Steve back into Kansas right around the time in a couple of years later for the Power album. And a guy named Tim Gert on drums. Not really familiar with him at all. I don't know what
He
he.
played on Steve's 1980 solo album. He was a drummer on that.
Gotcha.
It
Okay.
all makes sense. It's all coming together. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Where Mike sits in this is kind of bizarre because
I,
he's a British guy, so that's kind of
I'm
strange.
not sure the story is about that.
Hmm.
Maybe someone in the comments knows. I don't know how they were brought together, but man, come on. It sure sounds good on paper.
Oh yeah, yeah, and it's worked out pretty well here, I think. So we only have two albums, so we're going to keep this kind of brief today, but we do want to talk about these records. So we've got the first self-titled, and Crimes in Mind was the second and last. And this came out in 1985. So they were a couple of years apart from each other. It's a little strange in the 80s because usually they bands were pumping out albums, and they did some touring, but maybe because I think the first album had a little bit of a buzz. Obviously, Steve coming from Kansas, who was still a fairly big band. But when you take 3 years to put out a follow-up and you're kind of a new band, not
Kind
too,
of lose something. And I
yeah,
think that's probably what happened to him. Though, I mean, I know we're going to rank these records. This may be more of a discussion than a
yeah,
ranking,
yeah,
but whatever. We're talking Streets, and really the whole point of us talking about it is hopefully we can turn you on to it and keep the interaction alive. We want to talk about this band because who's talking about them?
yeah.
But you mentioned if the start of that first record, If Love Should Go was actually a top 10 hit. Um, I don't know what you
Great
think
song.
about this.
I think it's a
A
great
great
song.
song. What a
Yeah,
way to open a record.
yeah.
It's very Survivor, very 38 Special, very Loverboy. Though the thing is with Streets, they really do sound like themselves. Now I can go on and say, yeah, it sounds like 38 Special. Yeah, it sounds like Survivor. Could be Loverboy, but it's all in that type of wheelhouse. So I mean, if you're looking to listen to this band, that's what you should expect. That's what I hear on my end. I don't know, Pete. What, I mean, when you listen to this, what do you,
Well, here's the thing. The voice is instantly identifiable, right? I
yeah,
mean, it's Steve Walsh. So there's going to be that little bit of a Kansas flair. However, this band is very, especially on the first album. So we might as well talk about this because both of these albums sound really different from each other. Neil Kernon produced the first
kinda.
album,
Hmm.
and the first album is very guitar heavy. The second album was produced by Beau Hill, who produced like Alice Cooper and Winger and Rat and all sorts of other 80s bands. And it's very less guitar oriented and much more synth dominated. The
You know what?
guitars are way back in the mix.
It's funny you should say that because I look at the second record as being much more guitar oriented. I wish that Mike Slammer was up in the mix,
Well,
but
but
I
that's the
know what,
thing. Because he's so buried in the mix, it
okay,
sounds less of a guitar album. Oh, there's lots of guitar on there, but
there's
there's
lots of
a
guitar.
wall of crunch on that first album that is
Yeah.
sadly missing on the second album. I think stylistically, the albums are very, very similar.
Yeah.
One thing I really miss, and I talk about it when I was putting my notes together, I mentioned it a couple times, is that what I really miss about the both of these albums is that Steve is basically doing very 80s synth patches. Where's that roaring Hammond organ from the Kansas stuff? Where
There's
is
no
that?
Hammond organ at all.
No, there's
No.
like on one song on one of these albums, there's some Hammond. That's it. And it's just like it to me, he's basically just the singer in this band because the stuff he's doing on synthesizer is like nothing spectacular. It's like little things here and there, and it's some of it's just bad sounding. But the band itself is cooking. I mean, Billy's backing vocals sound amazing. Mike is just shredding all over both of these albums, and the drumming is very good. But more importantly, these are albums of songs and
Yeah.
mostly very, very memorable songs. So obviously, I know we haven't even conversed about this, but I know how we rank these, right? It's not that difficult. So why don't we talk about the
Well,
second and
maybe.
best album, Crimes in Mind, right? Because
Okay.
yeah. So 1985, again, produced by Beau Hill. Why don't you talk a little bit about it? Let me know what your thoughts are.
Well, this is okay. This album sounds a little bit more dense sounding than the first record. The first record sounds a lot more open to me. Now, the thing that I do like about this record is that it's a heavier record than the debut. I find that, but yeah, there's still some pop elements. There's still a lot of keyboards. There's a lot of synths on it. But I swear to God, maybe it's the Beau Hill production, Pete. But if you tweak this a little bit more, you could have a metal album here. That's the way I look at it. This is closer to metal than the debut. Like let's say that the song "Nightmare Begins," which is the second track, that riff could have been on a Dio album. That riff could have been on a Dokken album. It just needs tweaked a bit. It's a great track. I wrote on my notes, Dio, look out. But Mike Slammer, I know we've talked about Mike Slammer before, briefly. What a brilliant guitar player for anything. If you don't know Mike Slammer, he is a great guitar player that's done a lot of sessions. Yeah, he was in City Boy. No one talks about Mike Slammer, but if you listen to these guitar solos on here, if you are a guitar player, please check these records
Yeah,
out
he's a shredder.
because he is a shredder. He is all these guitar solos on here. And, I like guitar, so I like talking about guitar. Everything's well thought out. He is very clean player. Everything is just meticulous and just absolutely just tasty.
He's got
I,
this explosive fire, kind of like Gary Moore, right around
yeah,
the same time period for me. He's just got that intensity that is just undeniable. Whether it's
great.
even the City Boy stuff, which is kind of quirky art rock, right? And every time he comes in, it's just like he just explodes, and he does that on both
Right.
records. Yeah,
But on this record and the debut, phenomenal stuff.
yeah.
So anyway, so Nightmare Begins is the second track. Don't Look Back's the opening track. You've got gang vocals. You don't have any gang vocals on the debut, but we're also, don't forget what, we're in 1985. Things are a little bit changing. And I did write on here, this could be more of a metal album, commercial metal. It kind of reminds me of White Snake 1987 in that kind of territory. There's one thing about this record that bothers me. I don't have a problem with the songwriting. I don't have a problem with the vocals. God knows I already love Mike Slammer as guitar playing. I have a lot of problems with the drums because
It sounds like
I'm not sure. I don't think they're real drums. I think those are Simmons drums. If anybody back in the 80s remembers those electronic kits that were all Simmons, but they sounded like, well, they're electronic
right
drums.
from the beginning, from The Nightmare Begins, you hear it, and it's like you're all
And it
like,
really sticks out on Nightmare Begins. And I'm sitting here with my headphones on going, good God. And I think that dates it.
yeah,
But like we were saying, there's not that much difference between records. You have a little bit different production from Bow Hill to the what was the first
Neil Kernon, yeah,
Neil, thank you. A little bit different. The first album's a little bit more open. Now, if I'm looking at this and I'm looking at the material, I think, well, I don't know, you can agree with me or not, but I think that the songwriting's very
it's
uh,
similar, yeah,
similar. The second album really was a failure. It didn't do anything.
no, no,
The first album didn't do much either, other than for the single and, the, If Love Should Go. And that was really the only thing there. Uh, but are these worthy? That's my question. Um, I think a lot of people could get something out of them. I mean, if you're a
yeah.
completist on Kansas,
Well, that's the thing. It's again, if you buy into the offshoot bands and solo albums and things from some of these great bands, this is part of the Kansas history.
it,
And I think
and
it's a,
it's a,
it's a worthy part of the history.
yeah,
And I agree with you. I think that there are so many similarities from both albums. The way the songs are written and arranged is very similar. I think it comes down to producers for me, because what I hear in my ears is that Neil Kernon is making the sole focus of that first album on the guitar playing of Mike
mhm,
Slammer. He's playing his ass off on both of these records, but you hear him much higher and
right.
crisper in the mix on the first album. He's kind of buried on the second album, and there's more, the synths are higher in the mix. To
Yeah,
me, that's the big, and the drum issue. Okay. That to me is the big difference between these two albums, because otherwise they're very similar to each other.
right.
They're very
So it's
similar.
really comes down to the production, what
For
you
me, it
like.
does. It absolutely does. And
I
there's a
totally
couple of little
agree.
ballady things on the second album that like maybe I'm not that crazy about, but there's great stuff on the second album.
There's great
Oh,
stuff. And
yeah.
like I said, I don't think it's any worse or better than the first album, to be honest. I just wish Mike Slammer on the second album was higher up in the mix.
Yeah.
I don't have a problem with the keyboards. I just think, Mike, why is he so low in the mix?
Yeah. I
I
don't know.
don't get it. Um, and I think maybe on that second album, though, I do find the first half of the album to be fairly heavy,
Yeah.
fairly heavy.
It drops off at the end, although the last track is great. Turn My Head is really, really good, but like, and Rat Race is good, but like Desiree is
Yes.
okay. Gun Runner is okay. Um, like Crimes of Mine is really good. There's some really good AOR on this album. It's a very good, like mid 80s melodic rock album, basically. I mean, for everybody listening, there's no prog on either of these albums. These are not prog albums by any
There
means.
was a point where I did write down something that I thought, my God, is that like a prog? Oh, I have to find it in my notes because I can't.
Well, I think the
Anyway,
close of Turn
there
My
was
Head has some.
okay on the song "Fire," which ends the end of side one. I mean, ends the album for the debut. That song has that Walsh keyboard introduction. Reminds me a lot more of Kansas. And this album kind of ends where the next album leaves off, but it almost is in Dokken Rat territory. I don't know why these albums are so strong at the end, but they've sequenced it so the way it ends, you're going, all right, I wish the rest of this would have been like the rest of the record,
I
but you've
wrote in
got,
my notes, and Walsh finally cranks out the organ on Closer Fire. It's the
there
only
you go.
time on either of these albums that he plays organ.
Fire's like one of my favorite tracks on the record.
Yeah, it's a good one. Yeah.
It's got that middle eight that's very proggy. If you closed your eyes, you thought it was Kansas. And I know I keep talking Mike Slammer, but man, I just love him as a player. The solo on that record is on that track is killer. And I wrote on my notes, I kind of wish the rest of the album was a bit more like that because I think Fire is the best track on the debut.
It's one of the good ones. Yeah, yeah.
And Turn My Head, which also ends the album on the second album, one of my favorite songs too. It starts out with like a harmonium kind of thing. And then Mike Slammer comes in, Pete, and just rips it. And the song gallops along like the best of Iron Maiden. And I wrote on my thing, this sounds like a single. And there's a moment on that track. I know we're bouncing all over the place, but Steve Walsh kind of sounds like Mike Reno on this. But the thing is, with both of these records, I think they're really both. Yeah, maybe the first album's a bit better, but I kind of like the second album a bit more because it's a
Oh,
little
do
bit
you? Okay, wow,
harder.
okay.
Only because it's a little heavier, and it seems like they've loosened up a bit. Though maybe I like the production on the first record, but it is heavier. And the thing is, it's kind of sad. Is I would have loved a scene where Streets would have went after that second album.
Yeah.
Would they have went more down a metal territory? Because that's what I'm thinking they're heading towards. Because think about how Steve Walsh doesn't. I mean, he is pushing his vocal ability on that second album.
Yeah.
I mean, he's. I mean, obviously, he's a wonderful singer, or he was. And I think both of these records. I mean, if you're used to Kansas, he's really pushing it on these because it sounds like after all these years with Kansas, not talking bad about Kansas, but Steve Walsh is ready to rock, is the way I look at
And
it.
this is very vocal oriented material, right? You don't have
Right.
the soaring violin solos and all these keyboards and guitar solos. I mean, there's guitar solos aplenty on here, but these are compact melodic rock songs, basically, you know?
Yeah, it's
For
not
me, I think like the debut, If Love Should Go is absolutely terrific. Move
terrific.
On is great. One Way Street is really good. Lonely Woman's Cry is great. Everything is Changing is a could have been a single. I think that's
Yeah.
very catchy. Cold Hearted Woman's kind of bluesy. It's good. So Far Away, Blue Town, and then Fire. To me, I find the debut a little bit stronger.
Okay.
There's a couple tracks I would skip on the second one, but what's good on that one is really good. I find that the debut is pretty consistent top to bottom. Uh,
hmm
even though there's a little bit of cheese on both albums, but it's the 80s. You have to expect it.
There's probably more cheese on the second album with those
Yeah,
ballads, which are fine.
yeah,
But on the first album, there are some moments like So Far Away I find very commercial, almost flash dance like. But the hooks are great. Cold Hearted Woman, you've got that. Oh God, it's so wonderful. Mike Slammer's intro, which is kind of like flanged or a chorus. He uses a lot of flanger or a chorus effect a lot.
yeah, phaser or
To,
something
to
like that.
good effect, though.
Yeah.
Good effect. I don't have a problem with it. Um,
Well, that's his
but Cold
sound. I
Hearted,
mean, he
yeah.
sounded like that in City Boy. He sounds like that in what is it, the Seventh Key? And I mean, every time you hear him on an album, that's his sound. He doesn't change much over the years.
But he's great.
Yeah.
But the thing is, I know we're rounding this up, but I'm thinking, why didn't this band make it? That's my question to you. What's your theory on that?
I don't know. Again, most of Kansas's hardcore fans are prog fans.
Hmm.
Although they had a lot of, normal rock fans too, because they had some big singles. I don't know whether this was a matter of the record label not producing it much. Quite frankly, I don't remember hearing about Streets anywhere. I remember If Love Should Go on the radio, but like that, I don't remember this band being pushed at all. I don't remember seeing them in the magazines. I don't remember seeing them on MTV. I don't remember seeing them on the touring circuit.
No.
It's like they didn't exist, right? I don't know.
Until later, I didn't really know anything about them because, at least in Central Ohio, this wasn't pushed. They didn't play this on the radio. Yeah, I understand that there was a hit off the first album. I get that, but I don't remember it. I don't remember seeing these records in the bins.
No.
I don't remember any push. It took years until Wounded Bird brought them out on CD.
Yeah.
So these didn't sell at all.
And let's
Um,
be frank here. It's not like, Kansas's next album, Vinyl Confession, sold millions of copies because that didn't sell either. I mean,
yeah, well,
yeah,
nothing against Kansas, but their time they They had their moment.
They had their
You're
moment.
never, you only have your moment the one time. You're never going to recapture it. Unfortunately, Streets didn't have a moment really at all. And it's just really a shame because whether you start out with the first album or second album, I think for at least Mike Slammer and Steve Walsh, because Steve Walsh, I think the vocals on these records and the songwriting, come on. If you like that type of stuff, Survivor, Loverboy, anything in that 38 special.
Special.
But a lot of this, I do think it's great, but sometimes I listen to this and I think, well, these guys are kind of faceless. I mean, if you look at the photo like you showed, it's like, does anybody look on that record album or that cover like a star? Do they really stick out?
Even here,
And
look, it's the first album, right? It's just kind of like,
they kind of like look like a new wave band, or maybe Donnie Iris and the Cruisers. I'm just saying, but they don't look like a band that I'm going to go, oh wow, these guys are
yeah, they
cool.
kind of don't have that rock star look. I mean, this photo is terrible.
It's terrible. So maybe that's part of it. Uh, and the name of the band to me doesn't seem like a big
Yeah,
money maker.
yeah,
So there might be things against them, but I do think that anybody watching this, I think these records are worth seeking out. I like this.
yeah.
I like the second album a bit better than the debut just because
Okay.
it's heavier, but they're about the same as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, I'm gonna go with the debut, but I think they're both good and they're both worth having. And I think it's another example, and we've seen it many times over the years with like fairly either huge bands or fairly big bands that when like the singer or the main guitar player separates from the band and goes and does something else, and the band itself continues on with other people or another person, sometimes the success never reaches for either of them like they did when they were together. And I think this is another case for that. Sometimes it happens and it works out fine. Like I think of Black Sabbath, for instance. Ozzy leaves, he goes and does his own solo band. Dio comes in. Both do really, really well, but that's not the norm. A lot of times when that happens, success for both factions doesn't really happen. And this is a perfect example of neither Kansas nor
Neither.
Steve Walsh and Streets really were doing all that well apart from each other. It happens.
But either way, I think that these two records need. I mean, we've done a lot of shows, Dillinger, blah blah blah. I think this is one of those records, or both of these records. Really, anybody watching this, I think seek it out. At least check it out because I think it has a lot to offer, and it's just kind of lost through years and years of
Yeah.
not any. What's the word? Any not respect, but can't think of the word, Pete. The brain. Just
Brain. Just say you got the olds. Everybody
you
understands.
got the I got the olds,
Yeah, there you
but I think it's worth seeking out.
go. Rock Candy Records has, I think, in fact, I think they both were eventually released on Rock Candy,
Yeah.
right? But I've got the Wounded Bird for the first one.
I've got the Wounded Bird for the first one and the Rock Candy for the second.
Okay, yeah. So Rock
Both
Candy,
of them sound fine.
yeah, they do, they do. So go check them out. And Grant's going to go second album as his number one.
Yeah,
Debut is number two. I'm the reverse, but either way, no, there's no right or wrong answer here. So for
no.
folks watching, if you're familiar with these two albums, rank them as you like them down in the comments below. And we'll see you next time here with more stuff on Ranking the Albums a week from today. Till then, visit us on the web at www.seatranquility.org. We're on Facebook, we're on YouTube all together, all
All
the
the damn
time.
time. Yeah.
Please subscribe if you haven't already and click on that notification bell so you get alert of all of our content as a post. And please do hit the like button before you leave. Please go visit Grant over on Grant's Rock Warehouse as well as the Contrarians. You can see him over there all week long doing all sorts of crazy stuff, musically speaking, because that's what we all do here on YouTube is
It's all about the music, Pete.
it's
All
all
about
about
the
the music,
music.
right? So Grant and I got some other ranking shows cooking up probably for early 2025. So I got a lot of Little River Band CDs staring at me here. I've got some Black Oak, Arkansas, and some Simon and Garfunkel, and we've talked other things.
Oh,
So
that's
I think
Simon and Garfunkel. I
we
forgot.
mentioned Earth, Wind, and Fire as well. So it's
A lot of great stuff planned, but
a lot of
my
great stuff to
God,
do, and yeah, some fairly sizable catalogs too. So yeah, we'll get to all of them.
we'll get to it.
We'll get to all of them. So thanks for watching, everybody. See you
Yeah.
next week here on Ranking the Albums for Grant Arthur. I'm Pete Pardo. Enjoy the rest of your Sunday, and we'll see you soon. Take care. Bye
See ya.
bye.
Thanks.